Wales women were playing the Canadian women in the final of Test match of the autumn series for both nations at Cardiff Arms Park. Wales was slightly better in the first half and deserved to be 7-0 up at half-time. Canada played most of the game with 14 players with a yellow and a red card in there, and including the whole second half. And the red card is a very important talking point, which I will get to. Now, Wales scored the first try after consistent penalties by the Canadians concerning the driving maul. And this looked like a big issue that the Canadians were going to struggle with throughout the game. 3 consecutive penalties. Bookaboom, yes, that is a very Canadian name, and there is some NHL lineage there with Bookaboom, gets a yellow card. It's repeated infringements. Any one of the Canadian forwards could have got that yellow card for repeated infringements in the first 10 minutes. She's marched off for 10. Phillips, the Welsh hooker, gets the try off the resulting play, and it's a very, very well taken try. So they've got dominance in the forward pack at this point. And in the first half, it was a very scrappy affair. It was a brutal contest. Neither side could really gain an advantage. Wales were right again. I've noticed this with this Welsh side. I've watched a couple of their tests this autumn. They're rushing that final play in the 22 when they're in attack. They have butchered a lot of tries. Against South Africa last week, I watched the majority of that game. They coughed up a few tries there. They left points on the field. They were rushing too much. They were too anxious. They're trying to go for the magic play. And they could have had more points. They left points on the field. The Canadians, on their side of things, apart from the yellow card, they conceded no more points during that yellow card period. The game sort of became a little bit stop-start. That doesn't suit the Canadian style. They like it fast-paced. That suits the Welsh style. And it became an arm wrestle. Now, the red card for de Marchand, the Canadian captain and the prop, on the Welsh flanker, the high shot. It's a very interesting talking point. I don't believe there's any malicious intent, but there's clearly been a directive from World Rugby in regards to contact with the head. We did see a Canadian player against the US earlier in the autumn get a red card for head contact in a clear out at a ruck. Again, not the most egregious. This one, there's a fair bit of force behind it. Technique slightly wrong. We're talking an inch or two lower. That is a perfect ball and all tackle, and the Welsh player is being driven back in the tackle. We're talking that much in it. Had de Marchand bent her knees a little bit, and there was and the Canadian flanker, whilst involved in a two-player tackle, I was going to say two-man tackle then. Cue the feminists. Women's game, remember, women's game. The Canadian flanker is involved in the tackle, but there's not enough motion pulling the Welsh player down to give mitigating circumstance. It's just a technique issue. There is nothing, I think, in that was malicious. She has lined up the player to make the hit and has got the height. We're talking a few inches wrong. Literally, we're talking that much, and it's a perfect hit. But there's clearly a directive from Rugby. There's clearly consistency, which I'm really glad to see in this area. What I am concerned about is the Welsh player does not go off for an HIA assessment after taking a brutal shot to the head. De Marchand, there is no complaint from the Canadian captain. I think she knows. At the time she's sent off, Canada are slightly on the back foot, and you can see in her face she feels like she's cost her team the match there. The second half, don't worry about it. Second half, the Canadians decided to up the tempo, play without a fullback, and play 7-style rugby with the handling from forwards and backs, and it serves them well. They have a try disallowed in 47 minutes. There is obstruction in there. Could you say it's part of the ruck clear out? It's debatable. I've seen them giving us tries. Holcamp scores a try a few minutes later. Menin scores a try 10 minutes after that. Poulin's try, I think, is the best of the 4 that they score. Ripping the Welsh backline defence to pieces with her pace. Scored a brilliant try against England as well in the first half against England. The 7 circuit has definitely helped this Canadian team with their fitness. The Welsh, even though the Welsh had a player extra and the Canadians are down to 14 players, you wouldn't have thought it. You would think that the Welsh were down to 14. Phillips gets a yellow card, again for repeated infringements. It could have been any one of the Welsh players could have been done for repeated infringements. Their discipline completely deserted them. They couldn't get their hands on the ball. When they did get their hands on the ball, they'd just kick it away. They couldn't get any phases together. But we saw in the loose, Jesus Christ, I've never seen a flanker be so dominant in their position in a game and so destructive, where she's not the biggest flanker when it comes to women's rugby. She's very slight but very powerful. And again, it comes from the Sevens circuit and the fitness you need on the Sevens circuit. Destructive runs. I mean, taking 4 or 5 players, breaking tackles, deserves her try in 68 minutes. Could have had a second try. It's held up. You know, the Canadians, I think, butchered a couple of tries in the second half, but you wouldn't have thought they're playing with 14 players for that entire second half, and for a fair proportion of the first half either. For a good 60 odd minutes, they're playing with 14 players. That is ridiculous. And in the USA game, when they were down to 14 players, and in this game, they did not concede a point. So they're very well drilled. Their physicality, their fitness is second to none. There's a reason why they're the third best team in the world, and there's a reason why they were the best opposition England faced this autumn, and actually led England at one point. You cannot doubt their fitness. You cannot doubt their intensity. Their discipline is questionable, especially in the first half. Their discipline needs a little bit of working on, but their use of the Sevens players who are on full-time contracts make up a good core of that side. And the Sevens fitness translates to the 15-side game. The Welsh were gassed. The Welsh were absolutely gassed, and they had an extra player. You wouldn't have thought it. A brutal second half for Wales, but they will learn a lot from that because they're in the process of giving out full-time contracts and retained contracts next month. So there's going to be some professionalism in the women's game in Wales. Some of the best Welsh players play in the England Premier 15s over here, which again centralised contracts. And hopefully the game does turn fully professional for the Tier 1 nations in the women's game, because looking at this autumn, yes, there's been some lopsided scorelines. This game I thought would be closer than what it was. The Canadians haven't played a lot of rugby like the US, like the New Zealanders. They've only played a handful of tests all in this autumn since 2019. And you wouldn't have thought the Canadians have only played 3 tests in 2 years before this match. And you wouldn't have thought they were playing 14 players for the majority of the game and steamrolled Wales in the second half. And it was the change of game plan. They dropped the fullback, kept a full pack on the field, and basically with tap and going penalties, they upped the tempo. They kept it tight, wore down the Welsh pack and wore down the Welsh central defence, and then they let the backs and the loose forwards rip into them later on in the second half, and just they ran them off the field. But there we go. Thank you very much for watching. Place your thoughts below. The red card. Is this going to be a long-term directive now from World Rugby? Because that's several red cards I've seen in both men and women's games to do with contact with the head, mitigating circumstance. Or do you think that's still a fair hit? And do you think the Welsh player should have gone off for an HI, considering it was a red card and it was a pretty solid hit? This wasn't. This was different to the Canadian USA red card to clear out the ruck, which I thought was innocuous. This was a proper full-blooded tackle. No malicious intent, I don't believe. But what do you think on the red card? Anyway, thank you very much for watching. Place your thoughts below, and I'll have some more videos for you very, very soon.